Hello and welcome to another video on tutorialspedia.com YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to explain and demonstrate how we can use one of the very powerful and useful tool, Stoplight Studio, for creating the REST API documentation. This tool provides you a graphical way of quite conveniently and easily, as well as professionally, design your REST API documentation. In one of my previous videos on this channel, I explained and demonstrated how you can use Swagger UI editor tools for doing the similar purpose, and that's also quite a good way of creating your REST API documentation in OpenAPI specs. But the problem that many people face when using non-graphical tools is that understanding the entire syntax and the pattern in which you have to create your resources, your methods, your inputs and outputs, and models, and how those things are structured together. And on top of that, indentation related issues that you face when you're doing everything with the plain code is quite of a hassle. So people prefer that once they are going with API-led connectivity and top-down approach or API first approach, by first creating the API specifications or creating API documentation based on OpenAPI specification, they always look for some tools which can make their life easier. So when it comes to the tooling for Swagger or OpenAPI documentation, I found that this tool with the name Stoplight Studio is one of the best tools I have ever seen. And I'm going to use a free version of this Stoplight Studio. Of course, if you want to use it for a more of a business point of view, and when you need more collaboration, when you need official support from this vendor, then you can go for the pricing models and choose one of the paid version. But for the sake of this documentation tutorial, I will be just using their free version. And what I will do is that in this Stoplight Studio, I'll give you an entire demo of from the scratch, from the creation of the project until the completion of the entire OpenAPI specification based REST API documentation. So now let's proceed and see things in real. So here is the Stoplight Studio, which I have already opened. So if you want to do your REST API documentation using Stoplight Studio, you have two options. They do provide you web version as well as desktop version. So if you don't want to install, or if you don't have rights to install on your local, maybe if in case of your limited rights office laptop or something like that, then you can get same features on their web version as well. But in my case, I have already downloaded this desktop version, and I'm gonna use it. And it has options that you can choose dark theme, or you can use a lighter theme. And for this video, in order to make sure that you are able to read the content from this screen, I'm gonna use the dark theme, and then I'm going to just try zooming it. Okay, you can zoom it and you can zoom out as well, and that way you can see it better. So the first thing that we have to do is to create a project. So let me give it a name as Tutorialspedia API. So this is the name I'm going to the project itself. So API project, I will name it, because inside I'll create the APIs. And if you see here, you have options to create from the Git as well. So let me zoom out a little so that you can see. So you can see that here you have option for the Git URL. So in case if you want to do versioning, or if you want to do some collaboration within the team, you can use some of the code versioning system as well. So the one that is supported is Git. So you can push your changes, and you can pull your data from the Git repositories and do a more collaborative manner of API designing. But in our case, we are just going to create this API locally. And once you create it, you can see that you got a project created, but inside the project you have nothing right now, and it says that you don't have any APIs or models yet created. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a new API for Tutorialspedia. This will be just a sample API where I will have some resources and some methods to perform the operations on those resources. I will show you that how we can create resources, how we can create models, how we can create methods, how we can specify the request and response examples by referring to the model, and then at the end we will see that how we get a complete picture of our REST API document. So let me just create an API. All right, once I click on API here, I can give it a name. Let's give it a name as Tutorialspedia API. And here you can see that if in the format you have YAML and JSON. By default, YAML is selected. So depending on your requirement, if you have a specific strict requirement to create your API documentation in one of these format, you can select. Otherwise, it's optional, because most of the tools or most of the programming languages where you are going to actually do the implementation of your APIs after creating the API specs, they do support both. But if you have a requirement where only one of these format is supported, you can always choose one of these. And then here we have versions. 2.0 is basically Swagger, and then 3.0 and 3.1 are OpenAPI specifications. So you can choose one of these specifications. For me, I'm going to choose the latest one, 3.1. And in this case, it means that my API with the name Tutorialspedia will get created in a YAML format with the version 3.1. If you have some of the existing API specification or API documentations, you can select those as well and choose the import option. So for now, let's create this. And you can see that now you have this option of form, code, and preview. So in the code, if you still want to see the code, you can always go to the code section and you can see that the code getting generated. And if you go to the form, here you can see that you have a form based approach to do whatever changes or modifications or additional things you want to add into your API. So by default, it has added something which I need to delete. If you see here in this API, it has added some paths, user/user ID, which I don't want. So you right click and you just delete the path. And then it has another path/user, and I also want to delete this path. And if you see here in the models also, it has created a model with the name user. Model is basically the component in your API documentation. So I don't want this, because these are just automatically added content into your REST API, which we just want to delete and move on. So now you can see that if you go to the code, your API code is quite standardized. So it has OpenAPI 3.0. Then in the info, right now it has something which is still not customized by us, and in the components we have nothing and we have no paths, and this is the URL. I'm going back to the form, and in the summary I'm going to write something for my API. I will write, this is a sample API for Tutorialspedia demo for Stoplight Studio. And here you can always write some of the description in your real scenarios when you are creating your business APIs. In your API-led connectivity or API first approach, you want to make sure that the API documentation is rich in terms of the information, and there you will write some more details in the summary as well as in the description. So in the description, I'm going to write, this Tutorialspedia API required provides available methods and resources for API developers to uh, to perform various operations in Tutorialspedia. Okay, so this is just some sample description that I have provided. And if you go down, you have servers option with a plus button. You can add multiple servers. So the reason is that maybe you want to specifically mention what are your production and testing, or maybe some other environment servers where this API will be hosted. Let's take an example that we want it to be on tutorialspedia.com/demo/. ABC. This is just an example of the server. Normally the server doesn't have this context, so let's keep it as tutorialspedia.com, and in the name you can write like example server, but in real case of course you will have some meaningful names. And if you want you can add multiple additional servers as well, but for now let's keep it. In the security schema you will have multiple options to choose from, like you want API key, you want HTTP, OAuth, OpenID Connect. So if you want to have your APIs secured and you want to use some security schemes, you can use some of these. Let's not use it for now. And then in the global security as well, you can have the option, but here you don't have any option by default available. So we are not going to go into that much nitty-gritties. You can play around for more of these things once you will be doing your actual work. And in the contact, let's give some name. I'm going to give name tutorialspedia, and in the URL I'm going to write www.tutorialspedia.com and email admin at. Okay, it's not writing at something wrong in my keyboard. Okay, let's not write something actually in, it's not writing for some reason because of the keyboard preferences, so I'm not going to write, but you can write your email here. So in the terms of service also you can have, for example, abc.com/tus terms of services. So normally what you do in terms of service is that you provide the URL of terms of service page on your website, and here you can specify the license. So this is just a basic of the high level summary about your API. And if you see here in the specifications, now most of the things have been populated based on the information that you entered, but that's just the basic thing. Now we are going to see that how we can do more important things for your API. Okay, so in my case I want to use tutorials as the resource. So for that purpose I first want to create a model. So I'll go to models, I will create new model, and it has created with the name user. I'm going to rename it to tutorial. So for this model with the name tutorials, if you see here we have multiple options, and in the description we can write this is tutorials sample model. So I'm just writing some sample description, but of course in real case you will write some meaningful description here. And here for this model is basically the component. So if you will go to the code, it will be appearing as in the form of the component. So inside components you will have this model. So here you have option to create it based on a schema. You can specify an example, and you see here you have option generate from JSON. So let's suppose that you have a JSON for this tutorial. You can simply use that to create this model. And here you can even use the normal method of just adding the elements for this object. So let's keep it simple, and I'm going to use it to create the details for this object. So we have id. If you want to keep it, else you can delete it. So let's keep it and id, and then I'm going to name as tutorials. Okay, let's name it as title, because normally a tutorial has id, title, it has body, and author. You can have multiple author. In that case you can create an array, but let's keep it as a single author. So now we have id, title, body, and author. So these are the elements that I have decided for this object. If you see here, you have options that for any of these elements, what kind of type you want. Like if it can be an object within an object, it can be array, and it can be array of in primitives, or it can be array of objects as well. Then it can be a number, it can be an integer or a boolean, it can be null, and if you have some other definitions, you can do reference as well. So based on this, if you see the example, now it has already created an example. You can make more meaningful example. Let's give it something like id equal 1 and title uh, demo tutorial. In the body we can write something, this is sample body, and in the author I can write like admin. Okay, so now we have everything available for our model. You can have any number of examples. That's why there is a plus button. Let's suppose that you have a scenario where you want to make it more convenient for your API developers to give them different type of examples, but this is straightforward as most of them are string and then id we need to change it to number. Okay, so it says string or number, so I will just remove string, so it should be only number, because in the example also we already specified it as a number. Okay, so this is how we create a model, and now you will see that once we will be creating the bodies of our methods, we will be doing a reference to this. Now I'm going to an interesting part where I'm going to create the paths. So in the paths, I'll just right click and I'll choose new path, and this new path I'm going to use as slash tutorials. So first case, I'm going to create methods for this slash tutorials resource, and in this case it will be either accepting all of the multiple tutorials to be added in the post method body, or it will be returning multiple tutorials in the response of the get. So I click enter, and in this case I'm going to have I'm going to specify what are the methods supported for this tutorials resource. So tutorials resource is accessible on in this case tutorialspedia.com/tutorials. This is not the live URL, but just for the sake of example. And then get and post. So in case of get, let's see that if you want to add any description for this endpoint, we can specify here. If you want to specify some security or some header or query parameters or cookie information, you can do that as well. And in the body, you can add a body. In this case, it's a get method, so I will not add any body, but I will add a response. So in the response, I click on plus. So what kind of response you want? Response codes are available like 200, okay, 201. But in case of get, the success response is 200, okay, so we will choose 200. And if you want to add any headers, you can do. And now in the response body, I'm going to click on add body, and here you see that we have option to again generate the response body either from the schema, or we can do it object based. What I'm going to do is that I'm expecting tutorials which we already created at as a model. An array of tutorials is expected response. So what I'll do is that I'll click on this object, I will change it to array, because that will be multiple number of tutorials can be in the output. And then what we will do, okay, so now what I'm doing is that in this array of objects we can have multiple objects. So I'll click on this object and I will use this reference, and in the reference I'm going to refer it to, okay, just a second, I'm going to refer it to the model that we already created, which is under components slash schema slash tutorials. So this is the model that we created. So now what we are doing is that we are referring to that model, right? Okay, I already created this model with author, body, title, and ID, and now we are referring to that here. And if you see example, in the example it's giving an array, so it is going to be an array of this component that we already created, right? So this is one of the method which is going to return an array of this tutorial as an output. And the next thing that I want to do is that I want to have another method under the same resource or under the same endpoint. So slash tutorials can have a get method, but at the same time it can have a post method as well. So I will just select the post and I click on this add plus post operation, means add post operation. Okay, so post operation is also added. If you want any other additional description for that, you can add that. And in this case we are going to add a body. In the request we are going to add a body, and this body is going to be of type array, and subtype is object. So it's array of object, and which object we are going to do a reference again, and the reference will be, okay, the reference will be to the same tutorials. because the request that it is expecting is an array of tutorials that you can verify from the example. So if you go to example, you can see that it is expecting an array of tutorials as an input, because this post method will be used to add multiple tutorials for this, right? So you can have a name as well, like add tutorials. So this is the name that I have given to this method. And for the get, you can have a name as uh, get all tutorials. So we have given some names to both of these uh, methods, right? So in case of post, in the response, what we want is request we already specified, and in the response we want it to be 201 because 201 is created. So normally post operations have happy response or successful case scenario response 201. You can always add some of the additional responses for different error codes, because right now I only consider the happy scenario, but in case of unhappy scenarios, you have option to add other error codes, and then for those error codes you can have response examples as well. For example, you can see 204 no not create no content, then 404 402, basically all of the http response codes which you can use, you can specify here according to your requirement. And then in the response, we are not going to have any body, so it will be just a response with a response code. But if in case you need, you can have this option of adding a body as well. The next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to create another path, and this is going to be slash tutorials slash, and in curly brackets I'm going to add id. So this is for an individual tutorial, and this is used when you want to, let's suppose, get a tutorial with a specific id, or if you want to perform delete operation as an example for a tutorial with a specific id. Of course, you can consider some of the resources for the put and other operations as well, other methods as well, but I'm going to just keep it with get, post, and delete in this case, right? Okay, and another important thing is that if you don't click and enter in this Stoplight Studio, it doesn't create that. So right now you see my changes are not saved, so I did a mistake. So I should write slash tutorials slash, and I'm going to write in the curly brackets the path param id, enter. So as soon as you click enter, only then it gets created. So it has created by default get operation. So I will write it get a specific tutorial. Okay, so this is to get a specific tutorial, and the parameter that we are expecting is in the path parameters. If you see here, you have options for query parameters as well. You can add another path for the query parameter based query as well, but that I'll keep for you, and for me I will consider only one with a path parameter. Okay, so the body, there is no body for this because this is a get request, so only the response is there. So in the response, what I will do is, again, I will do the similar approach for 200. Okay, add body, and I will choose object, and this object of type array, and subtype is object, and this subtype I'm going to do the reference, and the reference will be for the tutorials component that we created. So same way. Okay, I did a mistake here basically. I'm sure that you must have identified this mistake. The mistake is that in this case, since this is going to expect a single tutorial as an output, so I should not create like this. So it should not be array, it should be just an object, and this object should be of the type tutorials that we already created in the components. So I apologize for the mistake I did here, that I wanted to create an array of objects, but that's not correct because it's going to expect in the response a single tutorial. That's why I change it. Now it is referencing to the tutorials, which is a single object, not an array, right? So now I'm going to do the same thing for the post. So I will choose this add post operation, and I will write this add a tutorial. So add a tutorial means it's adding a single tutorial, and in this case the body will be in the request. So I choose this add body, and I'll choose object, and this object is going to be of type tutorials. So observe here that it's not going to be an array, it's just going to be a direct reference to the tutorials, which is a single object to be added. So this is how its request is going to be, and in the response, instead of 200, I'm going to select 201, created. And if you want to have a body of the response, always you can add, like let's suppose that we want to add a body here, and I'm just going to create a string. Okay, so it's going to be a string, and example is going to be successfully added. So this is just going to be an example, and it means that now in this case the response will be 201, the HTTP code will be 201, but at the same time there will be a body as well with one string element. So this string element can be message. Okay, so now we have added this second method as well for this slash tutorials with the path parameter id. You can add delete operation, delete method as well. So I'll just going add this delete, and I'll name it as delete tutorial. And in case of delete, the input is having the path parameters, so there will be no body for the request. And in the response, we will be just having 200 OK, and we can have a message. Let's add a message, and the message is going to be of type string, and the example will be tutorial deleted successfully. Right. So this is one example, and of course you can add more of the examples, and also you can consider adding examples and error codes for other scenarios. Right now I'm adding only for the happy scenarios, and here you can select the output type as well. Right now default is selected as JSON, but you have plenty of options available, like if you want that response should be in XML format or some other, maybe GTD format, or in some other format like PDF. You can see octet stream is available, so a lot of options are available. You can just play around with all of these options. All right, so now what we have done is that let me summarize what we have done so far. We have created a new project in Stoplight Studio, and we have created an API with the name tutorialspedia API, and in the form initially we just gave all of the details for this API. And let me go to overview. Yeah, here we specified all of the details for the summary, description, the server details, if you have to specify any schemas, and the contact detail, license details. And after that we created a model which is going to be a component which we will be referencing. So that one I created with the name tutorials, and here I created all of the I created it as an object with 4 elements inside this object, one of them integer and rest of them are strings. And if you see here, you have many other options as well for this. Like if you want to have some other properties for some of these elements, you can specify regular expressions, you can specify some examples, some enum, and min length and max length. Plenty of options are available, so it's quite a good tool that provides you convenient approach to document your REST APIs. And then after creating these tutorials, what I did is that under the paths, I created some paths like slash tutorials with get and post methods. And I specified for the get method, I specified the response body in the form of an array of objects. And in case of post, I created this method with a request body in the form of an array of objects, because get is going to return multiple tutorials, and post is going to expect multiple tutorials in the input. And then I created another path with the name slash tutorial slash id. So id is a path or URI param, where we provide the id of a specific tutorial, and it provides 3 operations: get, post, and delete. So get is used to get a specific tutorial based on the given id, and that's the response of this get method is a single tutorial, so where we are referencing to the model that we created with the name tutorials. And post is expecting In the request body, a single tutorial object, and then it is returning your response with the 201 OK, which is the created status, and it is also sending you a message in the form of JSON. And then we have a delete operation, a delete method, which is expecting the same ID in the input, and then ID in the path parameter, no request body, and in the response, it's giving you the 200 OK response along with the message. And then if you want, you can add a put method as well. So the difference between put and post is that put is normally used to do the update operation, and post is used to do create operation. So if you want to create a new tutorial, you will use post, and if you want to update one of the existing tutorial, you will use put. Now let's go to the preview. So individual previews are available, like when you click on /tutorials, now it's giving you preview of this /tutorials, and it's giving you options that it has get method. Okay, and you have try it option, and if you want, you can see the curl that you can use. And if you go this /tutorial/id and go to docs, you can see that it has the required docs available. If you go now to the code, you can see that the entire changes that we were doing are available, all of these in this code. So this is the code for the API documentation. It has all the get, post, delete operations, and it has component that we created, and everything is perfect. You can do the mocking as well, which we are not going to cover here. So basically, this should give you a better idea of how things work in case of this Stoplight Studio, and very conveniently and comfortably you can create your APIs documentations based on OpenAPI specification, or even in case of Swagger 2.0 based specifications, and then you can share it with the developers or whoever is going to use these API specifications to implement the APIs. The next part, many times once I create some of the tutorial about documenting the API, they say what next. So the next thing is that, of course, you will have to do the implementation of this API, and that can be either in some of the programming languages like in Java or .NET, or if you are using some tools like TIBCO, MuleSoft, or any of the other tools or languages, you can do the implementation there, and then this will be a complete cycle of API specifications based documentation, and then API implementation. So that's it from this tutorial, and I hope that the information that I tried to convey through this tutorial is helpful for you. If you have any questions or any ambiguities, feel free to write in the comment section. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And for more information about various topics related to the integrations and APIs, you can refer to my website tutorialspedia.com. Thank you.